Well, greetings, everybody. So the other day I was working through one of the old Student Mathematics League tests, and my interest in doing that is that my school participates in this every fall and spring, and they've been doing that as long as I've been around. And as I was working the spring 2004 test, one of the questions for some reason just seemed interesting to me. I don't know if it was the logical deduction that had to be made or not, but it got my attention and I wanted to show you how to solve it. Okay, you can find this test and some others if you're curious at this website, amatyc.org, page SML past questions. So here's that question that I wanted to show you. It says that there's a library that has somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 books. 1 out of 4 of those books are fiction, 1 out of 13 are biography, and 1 out of 17 are atlases. Now that doesn't account for 100% of the books, so there must be some other kind of books too. Question is, how many books are either biographies or atlases? So it seems straightforward, but let me tell you how I understand the problem and then how I went about solving it when I was working through this test. So first, I'll divide this up into what I have to work with and what I want to find. So let's say B, capital B, is the total number of books, and I will assume that's a whole number, okay? And that B is between 1,000 and 2,000, so it satisfies that inequality. And 1/4 times B is the number of fiction, 1/13 times B is the number of biography, and 1/17 times B is the number of atlases. And that seems to be what we're given on a first reading, okay? And then what I want is what's 1/13 times B plus 1/17 times B. Translation of that is how many books are either biography or atlas, okay? All right, now I'm using question mark as a variable there for the answer. I know you might find that a little bit strange, but I'm looking for that number. Another way to express this statement about what I'm trying to solve for is that 30/221 times B is our answer, okay? And that assumes there's no overlap between biography and atlas, okay? There's no books that are both biography and atlas. Otherwise, this would be double counting. All right, so that's what I have, that's what I want. Now, as far as my solution, this is the way I thought about it when I was looking through the test. Maybe you can think of a more clever way, okay? But I'm curious to see if you can and what you think about this. Now, I don't see a way to solve this directly. And so, I think it's pretty obvious there's not a way to solve it directly. And so what I did is, since I've got these answers available, it's got to be one of these, I'll check the implications of each answer against the premises that are given, okay? So let's do like this. We'll turn this equation around. So it must be true that our answer is 30/221 times B, where B is the total number of books, which is a whole number, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. So I went through each answer, A, B, C, D, and E, and I just wanted to check it against the premises, okay? Or I'm turning this equation around, solving it, kind of solving it for B and checking those answers against it, okay? So that means that I want to see that 221/30 times the answer, which is given in A, B, C, D, or E, okay, is going to be the total number of books, where that number is somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, and it's a whole number. So first, choice E right here, multiple choice E being 300. That will give you that B is 2,210. So it's easy to dismiss that one because that violates the premise that B is somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. So we can throw away E right away. D, giving us that the answer is 280, gives us that B is 2,062 and 2/3. So that violates that B is a whole number, okay? If I look at C being 270, that tells us that B is 1989. Now that doesn't violate these premises. It gives me a number for B that's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, and it gives me B to be a whole number, okay? So is this the answer then? For that reason, it doesn't violate any of the premises given. All right, well, let's keep looking. choice B being 250, that gives me that B is not a whole number, so we can throw that one out. And choice A of 240 gives me this, that B is 1,768. And that doesn't violate the premises either, okay? So it gives me a whole number somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. So it looks like choice C and A don't violate any of these premises that I saw in the question, okay? So then the next thought that we have becomes, how do we decide between those? There must be some other premise built into this question that I haven't expressed yet in my work, okay? So how do we decide between choice A of 240, which implies that B, the total number of books, is 1,768, versus choice C of 270, implying that B is 1,989. So let's take a new premise, like one that I didn't think was explicitly stated when I read the question. When I read the question, these are the things I saw that were obvious, okay? But here's one that is part of that statement of the question, that a portion of the books in the library, and I say a portion, this isn't all of them, because those fractions don't account for 100%, but a portion of the books in the library must be 1/4 times B plus 1/13 times B plus 1/17 times B. That would be the books that are either fiction, biography, or atlas, okay? Putting this together, I can see what that means is that a portion of the books in the library, as accounted by these categories, is 34 over 4 times 13 times 17 times B. And then that must be a whole number. The total number of books is a whole number, but any portion of the books as divided by category has to be a whole number also. So look at that. Notice that when I combine these fractions right here, 1/4, 1/13, 1/17, I left the denominator factored. And the reason why is because I wanted you to see that contained in that premise is the fact that B must be divisible by both 4, 13, and 17. Okay? Because if this times B is going to be a whole number, it's got to be divisible by that 4 and 13 and 17. Okay? All right. So let's do this. To decide between choice A and C, which one of those gives us a number for B that is divisible by 4, 13, and 17? So if I take 1989, that's divisible by 13 and 17, but not 4, so it can't be that one. Let's check the other one just in case. So 1,768. That is, if you check it, divisible by 4 and 13 and 17. Okay? So it fits all the premises to select answer A. If A is 240, then it gives me B consistent with those initial premises given, that B is a whole number between 1,000 and 2,000, and it checks against this other premise, that that number for B has to be divisible by 4, 13, and 17. So choice A of 240, that's my answer for question 3. Okay, so that's how I solved it. Now, when I was going through this and I was pretending to take the test, I did not write the solution out in this much detail. And I think if you were taking the test in the math competition, you wouldn't either, because the test is timed. But nonetheless, these were my thoughts as I went through it. It only took me a few minutes to solve it nonetheless. But, you know, I think the thoughts are what is important. What you decide to write down as you actually solve it, that's another issue. In any case, hope you found that interesting. Hope it gave you some insight to that question. And if you have another perspective on solving this one, I'd like to hear about it.